Iceland is known as the land of fire and ice. Between volcanoes and glaciers, it's got plenty of both. But you might not expect to see phenomena like them on an island more than 2,000 miles southeast of Iceland, off the toe of Italy's famous boot. Sicily is home to Mount Etna, one of the tallest volcanoes in Europe. It's also one that's been erupting for millennia, and the nearly 11,000-foot high mountain is putting on a fire and ice show of its own, with the molten glow of an ongoing eruption silhouetted against its winter snow. Volcanologists say the lava isn't coming from a main crater, it's spewing from a fracture in the mountain, and we don't know how long it will go, but the scene of extremes brings a unique red glow to the frozen ground below. Hi, I'm Carl Azuz for The World from A to Z. Next, inflation. It's when the prices of things we commonly buy go up. It's been a problem for the economy for several years, and as of this January at least, it hadn't gone away. In 2021, inflation started hitting its highest rate increases in decades. That meant prices were jumping dramatically. For instance, they were 9% higher in June of 2022 than they were in June of 2021. 2 years ago, inflation rates started steadily cooling off. Prices were still rising, just not by as much. And last September, the inflation rate was 2.4% over where it was the previous September. But then it started ticking up again. And the government's latest report says between last January and this January, prices rose 3%. Inflation is cumulative. It builds every year. That's why groceries today are significantly more expensive than the same ones 4 years ago. The government does have some tools it can use to try to limit the rate of inflation, but getting the economy to grow healthily while keeping prices from growing out of control is a difficult balance to achieve.
Word of knowledge. A narrow, fast-moving air current is also known as what? Polar vortex, atmospheric river, jet stream, bomb cyclone. Characterized by high-speed winds that usually blow from the west. This is the definition of a jet stream.
And the one that blows in an often curved line from west to east across the U.S. is carrying a series of winter weather systems with it, what one meteorologist called a parade of storms. Tens of millions of Americans from coast to coast are under weather alerts. That includes some who live in Los Angeles County, California, where more than 18,000 homes and buildings were destroyed or damaged by wildfires last month. The disaster wiped out trees and vegetation that soak up rainfall, and that increases the probability of mudslides.
People should stay home. If you don't have to go anywhere, don't go.
Advice from Petersburg Public Works, and not just for Virginians, but for millions of people living up and down the eastern U.S. The first stop on a week-long rotation of snow, ice, and rain set to stretch coast to coast over the next few days. Virginia road crews in some counties worked 12-hour shifts to get as much salt and brine down as possible. Cities like New York and Boston still digging out after a weekend winter blast, now bracing for more, possibly later this week, as round 2 brings heavy snowfall from the Central Plains to the Midwest before revisiting the Northeast into Thursday. Then, by week's end on the West Coast,
we are now looking at what will be, up to this point, the most significant storm season so far this winter, impacting the greater Los Angeles area.
One that could pose a high risk of mudslides and debris flows over areas scarred by the recent fires in Southern California.
We're saying right now approximately a 50 to 70% chance of that activity.
Forecasters say the storm could eventually spread over the entire length of the state.
We're urging everyone to already have an evacuation plan, have multiple ways of receiving emergency alert information.
I'm Laura Aguirre reporting.
Rutherford B. Hayes had a phone installed in the White House. Its phone number? 1. Dial up more historical connections at periodicpresidents.com.
On this date in world history, February 13th, 1689, William and Mary were crowned King and Queen of England, becoming William III and Mary II. Tensions between Catholics and Protestants gave rise to a bloodless revolution that resulted in the overthrow of Mary's father, King James II. William and Mary were co-rulers until her death in 1694. French inventors Auguste and Louis Lumière patented something on this date in 1895 that changed how we see the world. It was called the cinematograph, and it could capture and project moving pictures. What's widely considered the first one of those was called Workers Leaving the Lumière Factory. And February 13th in the year 2000 was when the last original Peanuts comic appeared in the Sunday paper. Charles Schulz, who'd created Charlie Brown, Lucy, and Snoopy, had passed away in his sleep hours before the final comic was delivered. The man who'd said all he wanted to do was draw funny pictures had seen his work in papers for half a century.
Where in the world? This Central European nation was originally established as a margravate, the territory of a military commander, in the year 976. It was annexed by Nazi Germany in 1938, occupied by the Allies in 1945, and became independent again in 1955. Its capital is Vienna. This is Austria, a nation of 9 million people.
Here's a flyer being used for more than a hobby. This microlight aircraft is part of a project to reintroduce one rare migratory bird species back into the wild. Northern bald ibises were once a native to Central Europe, but because of relentless hunting, they disappeared from the wild. Early efforts to reintroduce the birds were largely unsuccessful. Ibises born and raised in captivity have a natural urge to migrate, but with no older wild birds to lead the way, they have no idea which direction to fly. It left conservationists wondering, how do you teach a bird how and where and when to fly? One Austrian biologist decided to guide them by taking to the skies himself. But it all starts on the ground. A conservation and research team hand-raised a group of ibis birds.
We get the chicks when they are 4 to 7 days old, and from that day on, they only see me and my colleague, the other foster mother.
These foster parents do whatever a bird mother would do for the chicks.
We feed them, we clean their nests, we take good care of them and see that they're healthy birds. But also we interact with them. Also social interaction is a big part of parenthood.
As a result, the baby birds imprint on their human caretakers. That's when an animal fixates on a person or object, usually their parent, and follows it.
And then we train them to follow the foster parents, which sits on the back seat of a microlight, and it works.
The aircraft takes off, and sure enough, the birds trail after the call of their human caretakers. The work has helped the northern bald ibis move from critically endangered to just endangered. Its population in Central Europe has gone from 0 to almost 300 since the project began in 2002. But the microlight flights are about more than just saving this species. It hopes to pave the way to help other threatened migratory birds. And if you recall the Audubon's migratory tracking tool, there's a lot of migrating flyers out there.
Of all the mascots we've mentioned, this has got to be one of my favorites. From Poco, West Virginia, welcome to the Dots. Mr. Ice's class is watching from the Mountain State at Poca Middle School, home of the Polka Dots. Jumping south to Alabama the Beautiful, we've got Mr. Moody's class with us from Jasper Junior High School. Great to see the Vikings today. And in the Middle Eastern nation of Saudi Arabia, thank you to Miss Saturia's class for joining us. From the city of Dammam, a warm welcome to the American school Durham. I can't decide whether this video needs a lot of explanation or none at all, but when it comes to scenes that somehow make more sense in Florida, well, a paddleboarding T-Rex is probably on the list. The Martin County Sheriff's Office said its Marine unit had a look, likely a long one, but that at the end of the day, there's nothing to see here, just a dinosaur paddleboarding. It was kind of funny watching him try to get up on the dock with those arms, though. Probably better on a paddleboard than bearing the bronto of a dino paddle. It wouldn't pleaseo anyone to see him brachio his Spinosaurus or an Ankylosaurus, which would leave him too Tyrannosaur to try to Ceratops the velocirapidity of a Gigantosaurus apex paddleboarding record. After all, that would make prehistory. I'm Carl Azuz. Glad you saw us today. This is the world from A to Z.